Good morning. Welcome back. It's been a couple of weeks since we produced a video. I originally planned on waiting probably the second semester and before I produced any more, but there's been a lot of emails from my students and from students around the country. I'd like to thank those in Mountain Pine, Arkansas, and Chicago, and a couple of other places around the country. I think El Paso, Texas was one of them. I got an email from that, and I appreciate your comments. I hope I'm worthy of them. I don't know so much on that, but anyway, thanks again. And there will never be a charge for this service because I don't believe in charging for something that's for the common good. If that were the case, if I believed in charging something for the common good, I'd become a doctor, or a lawyer, or a pastor, or something like that. I'm only kidding. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Shaping a new nation. Americans adopt the Articles of Confederation. A new constitution is ratified after Federalists agree to include a Bill of Rights. These are two separate things that will occur. I need to set the stage. America has just won the American Revolution. They defeated the British. Last major battle was the Battle of Yorktown. You guys remember that. Turning Point, Saratoga, etc., etc. Anyway, just becoming a country doesn't mean you're automatically a country. You have to have a governing document, a government in place to rule the country. So America began by experimenting with something called a confederation. And those of you who sit in front of the computer with your notebooks, you can write this definition down. If not, just try to remember it. A confederation is a loose association of semi-independent states. Pretty much each state is more important than the confederation or central government. That's a confederation. A good example of a confederation today, for instance, might be the European Community or the EOC, and not the EOC, the European Economic Community. But anyway, or European Union. Anyway, there's several examples of confederations out there, most of them not very successful. And we can talk about why these confederations weren't successful. But first of all, let's talk about the U.S. Confederation. It was the Articles of Confederation. Most people call the United States these United States as opposed to the United States. And that's important because that when you say these United States, that stresses that each state was independent. That's another issue that here in the United States we get confused because the word state actually means, in common language, a country. Now, obviously, here in America and Mexico and other countries that have divisions called states, states take on a different meaning. But originally, the term state meant country. So when Virginia declared its independence, it was the state of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of Georgia. These were actual or considered themselves independent states. Later on, during the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, you're going to see an attempt to return to this mindset. That's why the South called itself the Confederacy, because it was a confederation. Experimenting with a confederation. Americans debate republicanism. People consider the self-governing colonies that existed before the Revolution as the basic political unit. Colonists gave their allegiance to the colony, and the ideas persisted when the colonies became states. Unity through a republic. Colonists believe democracy gives too much power to uneducated people. They prefer a form of a democracy called a republic, where citizens rule through elected representatives. Occasionally, I will have someone come up to me and say, you said that we're a democracy and we're a republic. Well, a republic is a form of democracy. It's just not a pure democracy. It's a representative democracy. There are different views on republicanism, but the most important part is government is based on the consent of the people. John Dickinson, for instance, said it's when you put the nation's good above yourself. Adam Smith and followers, and Adam Smith is the father of economics, said that people should feel free to pursue their own interest. This slide is a basic pure democracy versus republic. Now, again, I want you to understand that a republic is a form of democracy. And this slide doesn't hit that as much as I would like for it to, but it's still a very good illustration. A democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% can take away the rights of the other 59%. That's Thomas Jefferson. Whereas a republic is a government of laws, and that's John Adams. John Adams also wrote, a democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes itself, exhausts, and murders itself. because there never was a democracy that didn't commit suicide. Those are strong words, but a lot of truth when you're talking about a pure democracy. The states themselves wrote their own constitution, and many of these state constitutions limited the power of central government leaders. They guarantee specific rights to citizens. They stress liberty, but not equality, and this is important. When you look at society during the 18th century, men obviously had more rights than women. Whites had more rights than blacks. Free had more rights than slaves. So this was not an equal society. However, with the exception of those in bondage, slavery, there was a strong sense of liberty across the board. In America, anyone, again, we're not talking about slaves, but any free person could move socially in and out depending upon how much money they made, and et cetera, et cetera. Only white males can vote, and in some states, you still had to own property to vote. Well, the people said we can't look at other Republican governments and adopt them to U.S. needs because this is the first time that you have state and national governments. You had ancient Greece, Rome, and Italian city-states. They did not last in the Republican form. Another debate in Continental Congress was, should representation be based on population or by state? Some states were large and some were small, but the Continental Congress believed that every state should get one vote. Now, again, this is not current. This is during the Articles of Confederation period. It also talked about division of supreme power. A confederation is an alliance where the national government and states share powers. And the Articles of Confederation, our nation's first constitution, assigned national and state powers. The national government handled war, treaties, weights, measures, and the mail. But there was no executive, i.e., executive branch like the president, or court system established to enforce or interpret laws. One of the issues was the Western lands. Who would get the Western lands? The lands that were not technically part of states, even though many of the states claimed them. Maryland approved giving their Western lands to the United States to pay some of the debts that were owed. Eventually, in 1785, after the Articles of Confederation went into effect in 1781, the Land Ordinance of 1785 created a plan for surveying Western lands, and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 was a plan for creating territories and statehoods. These are considered the two most successful things that existed during the Confederation period. By the way, the time that the country was governed by the Articles of Confederation is known as the Confederation period. Here is a map of the Northwest Territories of 1787. This would be the original land that would be included when trying to form new states. They would not be the first new states, however. The Confederation would also counter economic and political problems. It lacked unity. The states pursued their own interests. Congress had achieved a huge amount of debt during the Revolutionary War. Rhode Island even tried to reject the tariff on imports, and foreign debt could not be paid without tariffs. Creditors, those are the banks, believed the government should charge high taxes where the government could pay back the banks. Taxes, though, would put farmers in debt, and many would lose their land and livestock. Debtors wanted a large paper money supply, while creditors wanted a small supply. Why is that important? Because if I owe money and I need to borrow more money, the more money that's out there, the easier it is for me to borrow it. So therefore, if we have paper currency, that'll be easier. But rich people say no, because what that does is it devalues the value of the money that they hold. The Confederation also encountered foreign relations problems. The U.S. did not pay debts to the British merchants like they promised they would do, or compensate loyalists. We promised this in the Treaty of Paris. In retaliation, Britain refused to evacuate the forts they held on the Great Lakes. Why did Great Britain hold these forts? Well, number one, it's close to Canada. All right, we had a little glitch in the video, and I hope everyone can see this now. It's taking just a second. There we go. Foreign relations problems. We talked about the British refused to evacuate forts because the colonists refused to pay the loyalists and the British merchants they owed. This forced Westerners were unable to ship crops east through New Orleans because now Spain had closed the Mississippi River to American navigations. And since a Confederation Congress had little or no ability to enforce the laws, the Continental Army only had about 1,200 men in it, we were kind of stuck. And as a result of that, we will begin drafting the Constitution. And that's where we'll pick up on the next set of videos, Section 2, Drafting the Constitution.